If any of you listen to me, you know my love for Rock County, because Rock County, to me, embodies everything that is good about Wisconsin.
Yes.
And we're losing that value in the upper Midwest. And Republicans talk about the American dream all the time for entrepreneurs. That's a very valid dream. But there are no American dreams for people that want to start a small business when people don't have wages. And if you don't like the fact that so many people don't pay federal income taxes in America right now, what's the one tool workers have to make decent wages so they do have skin in the game? Unions. It's that simple. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the president articulate that. Tammy Baldwin's pretty good at articulating that. Russ Feingold was pretty good at articulating that. But I don't even hear that succinct message argued on MSNBC. They ought to talk more about unions on MSNBC, especially that ass Morning Joe. I'm not going to go into too many details on the fact that my show came to an end, but it is a kick in the teeth to lose your job. It hurts. And I have to say, there are people that lose their jobs that don't really like their jobs, and that still hurts, but when you like your job and you lose your job and your coworkers lose their jobs, that really hurts. And I'll take one exception with what you said about the uprising. The WTDY newsroom and my show did a damn good job covering the uprising. And between the Janesville Gazette, the Wisconsin State Journal, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, and yes, even the Capital Times, which has been reduced to having to be online, and then the one weekly edition, which is a wonderful paper. But we're not just losing progressive talk show hosts, we're losing reporters, we're losing videographers, we're losing editors. The new media is very dispersed, and there are a lot of people doing some very interesting things on the web, but they're not really making a living at it, or they're also not being fact-checked. There are not places to go so you can have a certain sense of community where everyone goes to get their news and their information. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 caused radio stations all over the country to merge. There was less competition, and there are fewer opportunities in radio. Now, this effort that people have put forward for my program is going very well. I can't go into details, but I will say they have gotten at least, by one Wisconsin Now's account, at least 10,000 emails and thousands of calls. So if you haven't called the mic, give them a call. Because, frankly, what we were doing made a difference. Scott Walker doesn't like me very much. That story that came out about the kitchen the other day, do you know about the $483,000 kitchen? I'm not gonna, I'm gonna blow my own horn. That came out because I had a tip from somebody who works in state government, and I put it through the proper channels to do open record requests. That's how they got out there. That wasn't the Journal-Sentinel or the State Journal being nosy. That's how that got out there. So while they're cutting people's wages who make $14 an hour and taking their collective bargaining rights away, Marie-Antoinette, as I call her, Tonette Walker, Marie-Antoinette is loading up that house on the lake, not with just a new kitchen. They have spent thousands of dollars refurbishing. And of course, what's the first thing she did when she got in that governor's mansion? Anybody remember?
Took down the picture of the black kids.
She took down the picture of the black kids and the white kids playing together in Milwaukee. It's a wonderful, beautiful painting, and it's now back at the Art Museum in Milwaukee. But they took that down. And what a message. What a message. It fits perfectly with voter ID. Fits perfectly with slashing Medicare. These people are brutal. I'm not an ideologue. I'm a progressive. I do think government should live within its means. These people are brutal. And they're not particularly honest. You know, and this is the problem with having a lopsided media. Measuring corporate on the right-left scale can be kind of confusing. But talk radio in this country has been dominated over the last 30 years by intransigent, knee-jerk people that get paid to foment division and literally argue to tell their listeners on a daily basis. They almost propagate Stockholm syndrome. Gotta pay more for your Medicare. Gotta raise your age for your Social Security. And it works. Now luckily, the demographics of the country are changing, but we still have huge holes. Let me give you the example. I like to talk about West Virginia. In this last election, by the way, West Virginia went for Clinton twice. I'll get to Clinton in a minute. Right? Went for Michael Dukakis. That's right. It went for Jimmy Carter in 1980. It's a Democratic state. There's no death penalty in West Virginia. But between the loss of factory jobs and the things that have happened that have been whipped up against the president, every county in West Virginia went for, Mitt Romney. Of course, when you're a coal miner or you're working in a steel plant in West Virginia, who's the first person you think of? Your savior is a venture capitalist, right? I mean, that guy just fits West Virginia to a T. And yet Joe Manchin, the Democratic senator from West Virginia, won every county. You see, we can't have that in America. You know why? West Virginia is a state rich in Union history. We can't have wide swatches of destruction of good turf for workers. And then sort of Democratic Party becoming this urban party in clusters. Let's face it, look at Wisconsin. I mean, it's wonderful that Milwaukee and Madison and Rock County, to some degree, have such a stronghold of progressive voters. I was born in Milwaukee. I'm very proud of Milwaukee. But even this time, you look at the map, every year, Sheboygan and Manitowoc fade just a little more. The problem is when you don't have Democrats dispersed out all over the state, you can't win legislative seats. And then, of course, with redistricting, they gerrymander. One of the reasons we're losing ground in places like Manitowoc and Sheboygan is the jobs have been outsourced to China or Mexico. Hell, I know somebody who lost one job to Mexico and another job to China. And it wasn't Mexico or China's fault, it's just that these corporations have these trade deals written in a way that benefits investors, not later. We're losing part of the fabric of our state. So, pardon me if I didn't get too excited at Bill Clinton speaking at the Democratic Convention this year. I don't think you have to follow a strict left-wing ideology. But the money politics played by both parties in the 90s, we're paying for now. So how are we paying for it? Glass-Steagall, the repeal of Glass-Steagall, which kept banks where savings took place versus the casino banks, mixed them all up together, and that had a huge impact. And then there was NAFTA. You know something about NAFTA here in Janesville. No, the GM plant didn't move to Mexico, but it moved to Arlington. They kept the Arlington plant open, closer to where a lot of parts are being made. Don't tell me if NAFTA hadn't passed, that plant wouldn't be still open. It would be. And then I made the mistake. I bought a Suburban, a used Suburban a few years ago, and I'm all proud, and I said, I got myself a Janesville Suburban. I opened the door, and it says assembled in Mexico. So I found out, what do the people make? Well, what do the people get paid that assembled my Suburban? About $4 an hour. And they're the lucky ones. I'm sorry. Bill Clinton, in many ways, was a good president, but he did things we are paying for now. That was not just the Bush recession. Both parties made it much harder for this country to come out of a recession. You know how many factories have closed since NAFTA and GATT and most favored trading status for China? 60,000 factories in America. I saw the trade deficit hit another record high the other day. You wonder what we've de-unionized? So we have some issues. Got to hold your own side accountable. NAFTA was not for the benefit of the American people, nor was favored trading status for a country that does forced abortions, has terrible environmental policies. There's a lot of things we can debate about. But the culture of corruption at the Capitol in Madison, there's more lobbyists now than ever before. And the culture of corruption in Washington, and it isn't necessarily law-breaking corruption, much of it is legal, which is probably the most insidious type of corruption. We are still paying a price for it. And Barack Obama's re-election didn't make everything okay. It was good. I supported his re-election in spite of some of my differences with him in beating back these racists and these snake oil salesmen. And just having to watch Mitt Romney pump his own gas the other day was very funny. But how much did you hear about what's going on with the Obama administration and the Trans-Pacific Partnership? I don't want to sound too arcane here, but you know, it's another one of these trade deals, and it's a big one. Anybody have New Balance shoes here? Made in America New Balance shoes? New Balance says that this trade deal may very well take the last place where they really make American sneakers and put them out of business. Because Vietnam will be in there. Oh boy, Vietnam, boy, they've got some great labor standards. And the problem with the Obama administration is they've got all these corporate chieftains over there negotiating this, and this has financial implications. It has implications for drug manufacturers, has implications for more jobs being shipped overseas. And they're not even keeping Congress in the loop. There's CEOs helping negotiate these rules. It's a big deal. It's not some esoteric, crazy little thing. It's a big deal. I talked about those things on my show. Because they're important. You know, it's so funny, every 4 years. Now, everybody's like, oh, Sly, don't talk about trade, don't talk about... But every 4 years, what are the ads they put on TV? They put on ads about China, don't they? But they never talk about the trade deals. Because both parties have been corrupted with money, which scares me about the Democrats. I mean, the huge amount of money that surged in to fight back what the Koch brothers were spending, that wasn't all pure money. You know, about 30 years ago, a little over 30 years ago, I was in between radio jobs, kind of like right now. And I was working at a law firm as a messenger. And reading a book about the 1980 election. This young attorney comes in and said, you know why the Democrats lost to Reagan? It was Jimmy Carter's fault. And I said, no, it wasn't. It was Ted Kennedy's fault. Let's start debating this guy. Well, that young attorney was Russ Feingold. And he was a Kennedy man and I was a Carter man. But we became best friends. And it broke my heart to have to introduce him on election night in 2010 to a man who's so uninformed, ill-informed, but that's what happens when people don't vote. Russ Feingold voted against all the bad trade deals. Russ Feingold voted against all the deregulation of Wall Street. Russ Feingold went to every county. Russ Feingold wasn't afraid to stand in a room full of Republicans and explain why he voted for the health care bill. We now have a senator whose idea of meeting with the people is going on Charlie Sykes' show. And he actually said this year that the outsourcing of jobs has not hurt the American economy. That's Ron Johnson. That's your senator. So don't tell me if we'd had more progressive radio around the state when he was making absurd remarks about creative destruction, or the fact that Greenland was called Greenland because it used to be green. Don't tell me if we'd had a more informed public that he would have been elected. You know, Scott Walker's election was a travesty, but it kind of fit the mold of Wisconsin, having a Democrat for 8 years and then a Republican, you know, coinciding back and forth. That Senate election was absurd. We traded the best senator for the worst. You can call Ron Johnson the worst senator now that Strom Thurmond is dead. So we have a problem in the state. And it was very, you know, the Tammy Baldwin victory over that ridiculous, blathering egomaniac. I'm never going to have to hear, oh, thank you so very much. I'm never going to have to hear it again. I'm never going to have to see him drunk at a Packer game ever again. Tammy Baldwin has an outstanding record, and she's every bit as good as Russ Feingold on the issues these progressive issues we're talking about. She's not a liberal, she's a progressive. So that was outstanding. But we didn't make much progress outside one of my favorite counties in the state, where we defeated Joan Islands and Evan Wynn. And a lot of people stood up to get involved in those elections, and that was a beautiful thing, because those two no more represented Rock County than Mitt Romney. But we didn't make much progress in these legislative races. And gerrymandering and the Republicans having all three branches of government was part of the problem. But it really goes back further than that. You know, when you're talking about hundreds of thousands, how many 100,000 fewer people voted in 2010 than 2012? Was it 500,000? It was just astounding. We've rigged state government that the upper class is now controlling, because poor people, people a little less engaged in politics, aren't paying attention in the midterm elections. So now we have a state legislature and a governor that do not reflect the values of this state. The state isn't all automatically progressive, but these are radical people that remind us of the robber barons, right? This is the Gilded Age on steroids. Because now, rather than just having a bunch of plutocrats here in the United States, they used to have to deal with farmers and small business people and unions. Now they just ship the jobs overseas. And don't think that this whole movement to put state workers in their place, or to do these right-to-work laws, doesn't have to do with the fact that these people don't make anything. They have no creative, discernible ability other than, you know, getting in their car elevators and going up and down between the two floors. They permanently want to undo everything that happened during the New Deal, and, you know, what Walter Reuther built. Those sit-down strikes. I watched that in Lansing yesterday. And I must say, and I love Lansing and I love Michigan. Michigan and Wisconsin are probably the two most similar states in the country. But our protest put theirs to shame. They're like, people, 12,000. Hell, that was a picnic. But it was sad. And that was a sneak attack. That was an attack planned by the very people that give Rick Snyder money. Rick Snyder had said he wasn't going to do it, that was divisive. Does that sound familiar to you? And then we get into the media end of this. I really got in a fight with the State Journal over the last couple of years because, you know, Scott Walker tried to deny that he had ever said that he would negotiate with state workers while he was running for office. The video existed. Again, on my show, but the State Journal and the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel wouldn't run it. I couldn't get the TV stations to run it. We had the video. He was sitting in the editorial board of the Oshkosh Northwestern, and he talked about how he would deal with state workers. And he said, no, I'm asking for furlough days, I'm asking for a little more pension contribution, blah, 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 blah. He goes, but I will negotiate the way it's done in the past. That video was a big deal, but because they didn't report it, it was like a tree falling in the forest. It was a big deal. He's a liar. I don't say that easily. The man is just walking deception. I don't know if his Boy Scout leader hit him over the head with a board. I don't know what happened. He's got that look on his face. The only time I've ever seen human emotion on that man's face is when he was hugging the widow Hendricks. Oh, the smile on that man's face. It isn't she piece of work. I feel like whenever I see her, I feel like you remember the TV show Dallas? Yep. Or Dynasty? Yeah. You know, a cross between Alice Cooper and Joan Collins. What a piece of work. But she gave the governor a lot of money. And don't think she isn't watching what's happening in Michigan. My guess is they will not do right to work in Wisconsin right away because the governor wants to be reelected. And that he knows that will probably hurt his chances of reelection. And he's got a sweetheart deal with, unfortunately, there's a union, the operating engineers, that endorsed him in 2010 that are in bed with the road builders. And I think he probably doesn't want to put the kibosh on that. But if he gets reelected, watch out. If you don't think, and you know, whether he's able to sort of keep the Luddites in the assembly calm and not do this. They're chomping at the bit. They are chomping at the bit. And I'm sorry, there's still too many people that don't have any conception of why right to work is really nothing more than a bill to support freeloading. Right? That's what that is. It's freeloading. When you have a contract at a factory, and you have health benefits, and you have people negotiate that, and you have people with lawyers that represent workers when they're falsely accused of something, or even if they do something wrong. That's not free. And if the majority of the people in that plant vote to have representation, the notion that we would let them get away with getting that service for free, it's how we have to sell it. This is really going to be a brutal time. And it is my goal to get back on the radio. I was thinking about this the other day. I wanted to say that the people in South Central Wisconsin have lifted me on their shoulders, but I'm a pretty big guy. But they have. And the groups, One Wisconsin Now, We Are Wisconsin, Progressives United, varying level of engagement in this, the ownership they've taken in this, and the efforts they've made are just astounding. We didn't win the recall, and we didn't prevail in the legislature. But there is something building, and you can see it. And there's no better example, obviously, than what happened here in Rock County, but also what happened in Milwaukee in the primary. Anybody watching what happened in Milwaukee in the primary? There was some dead wood from Milwaukee. There was Jason Fields, who was Scott Walker's favorite black Democrat, who would vote for voucherizing schools, which is a whole, we haven't even gotten to education funding yet. There was Peggy Kruzik, whose favorite state senator was Glenn Grothman. Peggy was in the state assembly. She's a rabid anti-abortion fanatic. Then there were some open seats, and unfortunately there were some people that tried to use race in the black community to try to defame Sandy Pash, who was, they divided some of these districts so it would pit Jewish community against the black community. The Republicans did some really sneaky things. These people are bastards. They're the most cynical bastards I've ever seen in my life. I don't care if this is being recorded, that's what they are. But you know what happened in Milwaukee in the primary? Wisconsin Progress and a number of these organizations, they got a young man to take on this Jason Fields, who was nothing more than a corporate Democrat, and Mandela Barnes got elected to the state legislature. Nakia Harris is going to be a new state senator, African-American state senator. These are progressives. They're not part of the old machine party politics in Milwaukee County. These are progressives. These are going to be our leaders in the future. And of course, Andy Jorgensen has been just outstanding. But we've got some new ones coming in Dane County too.
He was here, by the way.
Yeah, was he?
Yeah.
He's terrific. You don't get any more Wisconsin than Andy Jorgensen. But we've got some really terrific. Diane Hesselbein is going to be just outstanding. We got people that aren't going to just throw their hands up. Or just say, well, you know, I voted against that. We're in trench warfare. And it may be a while before the Democrats get the legislature back. It may even take redistricting. But the next time we get the legislature back, what's the first thing we're going to do?
Restore collect story. Better be.
Right? What's the second thing we're going to do? We're going to reform redistricting. This is a corrupt. The fact that Paul Ryan can draw his own district. You know, between the loss of population in places like Racine and Kenosha, and then putting half of Waukesha County in Little Eddie Munster's district, he saved himself. He literally got to save his job. He never was concerned about saving the jobs that left the country, but he sure was pretty good at saving his. Legislators shouldn't be able to draw their own lines. It's like, you know, Mom, can I grade my own papers? It's serious, that's what it is. It's a corrupt practice. And I'm sorry, the 2 years the Democrats controlled both houses and the governorship, they weren't the most inspiring thing in the whole world. You know, I'm against payday lenders ripping off people, but there are some other issues that we should have tackled. One was campaign finance reform. The second was redistricting reform. And frankly, you know, it didn't work out in Michigan, but I want to see a constitutional amendment at some point that workers have the right to collectively bargain. And you know what?